to all of you, but especially to His Majesty. If it were not for him, I would not be in Bhutan right now. And many of you would not either. It's really his support and his care for Vajrayana teachings that allow them to flourish in such a broad way in this country. When he came to visit the other day, unexpected, right? We didn't know what was happening. It took me only a while after meeting him to consider why I was so deeply affected by his presence. I think that has to do with the fact that for our time, he is upholding if you think of it as a tent, he's upholding the tent of the Vajrayana more than anyone perhaps in the entire world right now. And his presence in this country and in this building really, it transformed my personal experience. And for a little while after that, I was able to see this place as pure in a way that I hadn't before. His Majesty talked to everyone and spread his blessing around, and then he left. And I was suddenly struck with the fact that who are we surrounded by? We're surrounded by yogis and scholars and khenpos and lamas, and those people are just waiting for us to talk to them, to just extract whatever information we can from them. And then in every room, there are these talks that are from amazing people like Klaus Dieter with this a lifelong insight into our world, our Vajrayana world. It just really blew my mind. So the day went on, we had a little dinner, and after dinner, I started to come up for Kala Rinpoche was going to make a little presentation, and he was in one of the rooms downstairs, kind of warming up, so to speak, right? So we went in and we got to see Kala Rinpoche performing the Chokor. Now, I've been involved in Vajrayana for almost 30 years, and I'll tell you, that's pretty rare. I mentioned it to a Khenpo friend of mine the other day, and he couldn't believe it. His eyes got like saucers. You mean he did it in front of everyone? What is that? That's like if you were in Shambhala, right? Where in every corner there's instruction available, from the most gross to the most subtle, and everything supports us in attaining enlightenment. Incredible. So I put this picture here because I'm just so incredibly grateful to him for doing what he's doing and allowing not only this conference to happen, but this country to happen. It really struck me. 100 years ago, there were Buddhist kingdoms all over the place: Dzongchen, Derge, Sikkim. Now there's only this place. And if you go outside and you look in any direction, you see monasteries, hermitages, you see places where where there are prayer flags marking. It's a magical place, and it's very easy to enter into a state of pure perception, which is the very hallmark of Vajrayana. It's amazing. I think in my own life, I'm considering him like at the time of Guru Padmasambhava, Kintri Sungdatsen, supporting the teachings, supporting the translations, supporting all the monasteries, and it's like a little bit of a miracle to be here. The world's changing so fast, and I've spent quite a bit of time in eastern Tibet, where the Dharma is still really strong, but it's not like this, right? This is a place where at the highest level, people are doing the same practices that we're doing. And for someone who loves Buddhism with his whole heart, this is so touching and incredible. So I wanted to make a point of that. Since we have this brief opportunity to be here, I don't know, some of you are Bhutanese, very fortunately, but the rest of us, in a few days we'll be gone and we'll be back I'll be in Colorado, which is a great place, but it's not Bhutan, I'll tell you that. And I'm hoping that in some small way, maybe my talk will encourage you to bring what you get of pure perception here in this magical place back to your own homes and spread it around, because it's communicable, right? When one person enters into whatever you want to call it, the view or the meditation, or starts to see things as purely, then the other people around also can feel that, and that's how we can really keep Vajrayana alive. So I thought I should mention that. But I only have a few minutes, so I'll give you a little bit of what I actually did prepare.
When I first put the talk together, I thought I would talk about intersections between Dzogchen practice, which is my personal interest, and the practices of going to the pure realms after death. In order to do that, we have to go through a few things that people need to understand. As you know, and I said before, pure perception is the key point of the Vajrayana. Theravada, the key point is renunciation. In Mahayana, it's bodhicitta, compassion. But for us, it's pure perception. It's an actual transformation of how we see what appears to us, very much so, as the external world, even though, as we know, it's a combination of external factors and a lot of internal business. And as Klaus Dieter reminded us a little while ago, when you experience pure perception, what you're really experiencing is reality. You're not experiencing something you're overlaying. You're not spray painting onto a terrible nightmare world, a vision of things as really nice and clean. You're actually seeing things how they really are. And in both Dzogchen practice and in some forms of pure realm practice, that has to do with ending your involvement with concepts. Concepts, all of our ideas about everything, are the reason that we don't see things as they actually are. We're overlaying on everything. So I invite you during my little jibber-jabber here to try to enter into a state of pure perception. And let's try to keep that going as a group as long as we can. We're going to be on airplanes in just a couple days. And the longer and deeper we can rest in that, the more benefit we can bring to the people around us, which is the only purpose of Buddhism. So for Dzogchen, as all of you know probably, and many know much more deeply and completely than I do, so just the most brief overview. There are three essential parts. It's usually seen as like a preliminary, a main part, and then the sort of final exposition. And those are called the Rushen, which means to separate. The Trekcho practices, which is like to cut through the solidity of our fixated mind. And then the visionary practice of Togal. So we'll talk just really briefly about what those are. So usually when you receive teachings on Dzogchen, you receive it on Rushen first. And Rushen is it's almost seen as a preliminary. But in my own personal experience, and I think it's just one way to look at it, it's not as much a preliminary as a various gateways to enter into a state of seeing things as they actually are. So, let's see. In the Rushen practices, they're outer and inner. There's different breakdowns depending on different systems. And there's practices for body, speech, and mind. But I thought that I would talk about just one. And it's not giving instruction here. So for those of you who don't have this important empowerments, you can seek these out from your teachers and practice these things. But there's one practice in particular having to do with the speech, where you visualize a certain letter going out of your body, out of your mouth, sometimes out of your nose, and plastering all of reality. It's a practice where you use the letter Hung. And as you do it, you sing the Hung in a certain melody, and you breathe in a certain way, and you look at the sky in a certain way, and you imagine that Hung letters cover everything. And if you do this in an effective way, then you can have an experience right there that everything is the same. That differentiation is something I'm doing. It's not something out there that I'm seeing. It's something that I'm bringing to the situation. And it can be extremely powerful. And beings like Guru Padma Baba, these are all beings who have visited Bhutan, taught this practice, and his main disciple, Yeshe Tsogyal, she wrote these practices down and also practiced them in her own life. Longchenpa, or the great Longchen Rabjam, who was in Bhutan for a long time, as Champa knows very well. Drpa Kunle, my favorite Terton, Pema Lingpa, even more recent masters like Lomte Khenpo. I want to just take a second. Here he is in a yogic aspect. I mean, he was alive in the 1970s. That's right now, and that's only because Bhutan is an environment in which such beings can exist. Pretty amazing. All of them practice these type of yogas, and all of them were able to, through the yogas, pierce through our conceptualization, which manifests as confusion and as distancing and as me and you and those two things. And as soon as that happens, as soon as our mind goes out into the world, then we fall into the categories of liking some things, disliking others, and just ignoring everything else. That's the three poisons. But when we stop doing that through these practices, then we see things as they actually are in a kind of a non-dual way. And the world becomes a pure land, right then. Now, whether we can sustain it or not is a different thing, but it's certainly possible. So this first practice, Rushin, is not so much a preliminary to something else, because some people think, oh yeah, let's get through that so we can get to the real thing. But it's actually a gateway in and of itself and can lead to the experience directly, which is pretty amazing. When you finish the Rushin, then what is normally taught as the main practice of Dzogchen is what's called Trekjo, which is to cut through solidity or cut through discursiveness. And Dr. Togal lived right here in Bhutan. My own teacher, Vajrayāna Buddhism, was sort of one of the kings of the Trekjo view and was very dedicated to and generous with his teachings. And anyone who met him was open to experience the nature of themselves in a way they usually hadn't done before in an amazing way. And that was through his incredible practice of Dzogchen and his mastery. In Trekjo, we're cutting through solidity, our fixation on things as being real. We're turning our vision from going out through our senses and falling into the three poisons. We're turning it toward ourselves, and we're seeing who's the looker? What is the nature of this being who experiences himself or herself as one of many? What's the real nature? And this, if you receive, usually it's given as an introduction or what's often called the pointing out instructions. And when these instructions are given, especially by a great master like Togal, then the student can experience directly their own nature, which is something that's non-dual, which is something that is not based on anything. It's not standing on anything. And as a result, when entering into that state, you find immediately that what you do perceive, because it's not like you can't see after that, is in some way non-dual as well. And that is exactly the vision of the pure realm. So again, in this practice, it's not a preliminary for something, it's the whole point of it. And by doing that, then we can not only liberate ourselves from our confusion that's continuously arising, at least in me, but we can also benefit others simply by resting in that state. And anyone who met Togal or any of the masters like him, you just have to be in their field, right? I see some of you nodding, and I know that you know just what I'm talking about. In fact, we can enter into that right now. Right? At least for the next 5 minutes. So when you do that, when you turn the mind toward the mind, which requires some instruction or at least an introduction from a teacher, and I want to recommend, as Togal always did, if you haven't received this introduction, seek out your teacher and try to receive it. It'll change your life, and that's the purpose of Buddhism, right? It isn't just a conceptual field of study. But when that happens, then that non-dual experience is carried into all of our lives. They say there's no sessions and no breaks after that. It's not just that meditation takes place on a cushion, and when you get up, you're just a regular person. It's that you're trying to do that all the time, trying to live from that place. It's done as a practice in and of itself, and if you receive only this one teaching, there are many stories of great siddhas who only met the teacher one time, received one instruction, went to a cave or a hermitage and practiced hard and became great masters. So it's possible with just that. But it's also seen as a little bit of, if you look at it as the step-by-step processing of Dzogchen as a path, and it's also seen that it's a stepping stone to the next kind of practice, which is called Togal. And this is kind of a top secret thing, so we'll only talk about it in a general way. But again, I encourage all of you to seek out someone, a lineage holder who has these instructions, and try to receive them, because if we don't do that, who's going to do it? Right? I mean, there are so many people here, who are interested in this stuff. Make a go at it, right? We might as well try. It might be you that attains the rainbow body, Anyway, Togal is considered sort of the ultimate practice in all of the 9 yanas, at least by the Nyingma. You can do it in the day, in the light, and it can also be done in complete darkness, which is a dark retreat. It's sort of an extra special way of bringing out what's inside of us. And by maintaining the view of Trecho, the view of your own nature, combining it with certain postures, a special way of breathing, a special way of gazing, then you can bring about a direct experience, mostly through your eyes, but through other senses as well, a direct experience of the Sambhogakaya realm. So this is like a direct entering into the pure realm. It's like it has you have an opportunity to witness what is beyond the Nirmanakaya. Now that isn't like an automatic thing, it takes quite a bit of practice, but it is possible. And why is it possible? Because our true nature is already enlightened, right? It's already inside of us, as Klaus Dieter was pointing out earlier, from the Shenton perspective at least. As the visionary experience ripens, and you can see mandalas, you can see Buddhas in their pure realm, and you can purify the after-death experience of the bardo so that you don't have to enter into the bardo after death, and you can be liberated right at the moment of death, which is, of course, the ultimate purpose of Buddhism, is to be liberated from samsara. It's a practice that's not taught very often, but I was very inspired a few days ago. A student of Gangten Togal, Rinpoche, who is a Kempo, who I know from America, came to my hotel where I'm staying. We got to hang out a few hours, and I was asking him what they were doing, and he said that during the pandemic, Gangten Rinpoche brought, I think he said there were 10 of them, several of whom I knew, which I was surprised about, up to a special place in Pemalink where they stayed there 2 months. And they practiced all of these practices in complete secrecy and no one around. He said it was like one of the most wonderful times of his life. So again, why is this happening? Because of the king. The king is allowing these things to occur. So I wanted to say, since I'm just about to be out of time, we should really, everybody in this room, not just the Bhutanese, but everybody who cares about Vajrayana, or even Buddhism in general, should pray for the long life of the king. Every day we should make aspirations that he live well, be healthy, and maintain his love of the Vajrayana, right? Because that's going to support us. Because we can come here, here from America, as I said, but I have to go home. I wanted to extend my visa, and I'm not going to allow it, so I have to go home, and so do you. And when we go home, we want this to be a place that we can at least return to in our dreams, if not in reality. So, all right. Yeah, this is how it is, right? And it's big topics in only a few minutes. Anyway, there's some stuff to say about pure realm practice. And when I talk about it from the Vajrayana perspective, which consists of praying usually to Amitabha Buddha. Many Buddhas have pure realms, but oftentimes you have to be on the first bhumi. You have to have entered the path of seeing to go to those pure realms, and so they're not good destinations for ordinary people like myself. But Sukhavati, because of the kindness of Amitabha Buddha, anyone can go there. You just have to want to. So usually the practice consists of saying aspiration prayers to go there, visualizing the pure realm, reciting the mantra of Amitabha, Amamideva Pri, and in our tradition doing Poa practice, which is the transference of consciousness. And it's my experience, and maybe yours also, that even a minor exposure to these practices, and you do it every day for 2 weeks or something, you suddenly, at least it happened to me, you suddenly realize, I think I'm going to get liberated when I die. I think that's really possible. You can feel the blessing of Amitabha. And this is my final thing I'll say. As soon as that happens, it's almost like time collapses, and it's as if, because you are almost you feel like you're guaranteed to be liberated, and since death is totally uncertain, an arrow could shoot in the window right now and kill me, you feel like, maybe I'm liberated right now in a certain sense. So, I think that's all I've got. Rinpoche has arrived, so I'm going to end my talk, and thanks for letting me shoot my mouth off for a little while. Appreciate it.